It's Friday, August 30th, 2024, 8:30 in the morning. We came here at the crack of dawn. The sun rises about 6:55. We are here about 7:05. And today we moved the cows and we moved the doggies too with the sheep. It's kind of tough to move the dogs when it's so much grass, but hey, we're out of the woods now. So I think this is it for the woods. It's supposed to rain today in the evening, and tomorrow and Sunday there's a good chance of rain too. It certainly looks like it's going to rain with the overcast clouds and everything. But right where I'm standing here, the grass is really, really good. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, about this time of year, that I pretty much had run out of grass because of the drought again. And I came here and there was a grass that I don't really see growing anywhere else, but this whole area was just covered with it. So it kind of saved me a little bit. Gave the cows a reprieve from trying to scrounge for little pieces of grass. This was back when I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was overgrazing. I wasn't letting the grass regrow. What I should have done was taken the cows off the pasture until I had grass to graze on. One of the things that came out of Grazing 365, Bennett Grazing 365, I watch him because he's a pretty similar climate to mine, even though he's more inland. I think he's almost directly east of where I'm at. But he's pretty adamant about the results that he saw when he started doing the total grazing technique, which that's like Jim, oh gosh, it's not Jim Garish. It's a Mexican dude. He puts his videos out in Spanish and in English. He puts one out for English and one out for Spanish. And I think there's two big things that come out of his technique, and I have to investigate this further. Number one is the grazing it to the ground, right? You got to go in, you got to graze everything. So put them in tight compaction, move them, 2, 3, 4 times a day. But just make sure that they're eating everything down, right? And then move on. Don't let them go back to it for a long time. Give it plenty of rest. And so that makes sense. That's rotational grazing. People argue about, well, should you cut this much or should you eat that much or whatnot, and how long do you have to let it rest and all that kind of stuff. I think most of that stuff is fairly intuitive for somebody who's been doing this for a couple of years, right? Even I figured it out, right? If I can figure it out, pretty much anybody can figure it out, right? The other technique that he uses that I don't think people appreciate or they see or they understand enough is this technique of stockpiling or leaving pasture alone for a long period of time. So if you read Greg Judy's books, he explains that he's always leaving 1/3 of his pasture as stockpile for the next season, right? And if you watch his videos, he'll say something like, oh, we haven't been to this field for 6 months, right? So the technique is just letting the grass alone, just leaving it alone, letting it grow, And even though you can go and graze it, you don't. You just let it sit there and grow, let it complete its life cycle. And so Bennett 365, Grazing 365, he recommends 1 year of rest. So he takes half of his farm and he cuts half of it and says, I'm not going to touch this all year long. And the other half he grazes on, and he keeps repeating the grazing, and he just grazes it into the ground, right? And the theory is, or rather the results that he's observed and he's talked about, is that if you let the plant grow to maturity and stay there for a while, and then you graze it down, the roots will die, which is what you want, because the dying roots is how you build soil deep underground, right? Everything you do on the top of the soil doesn't really do much for the stuff underground. So you got to get those roots deep down underground, and then you got to kill those roots, right? And then let them regrow and kill them, let them regrow and kill them. And so this part of the pasture that we're sitting in, I grazed it in the early spring. I'm thinking like March. I'm pretty sure I left the southernmost part of my pasture at the middle of March, and I started at the north. And so this part of my pasture was left alone for at least 5 months, right? And so I'm coming here, it's almost September, and I'll probably reach the end mid-September. And so that's 6 months of rest, right? And And I think that that's probably one of the most important things that I've done, is giving the ground rest and setting aside a part of the pasture just not to graze. Now, I had anticipated to do a little experiment with Ben's 1 year of rest thing. I was really interested in that. I thought that might be a really good idea. So I tried to set aside my neighbor's back 20 for 1 year of rest, but my neighbor told me that they were going to mow it in August, right? And so I put the cows back there, and I kind of grazed it a little more than I probably should have. You know, not too much more, but a little more. And so beyond that netting there, that's my neighbor's back 20. And to be honest, I'm pretty pleased with the results. I kind of wish he didn't mow it. I wonder if he's going back there and saying, I probably shouldn't have mowed it, but whatever, he's going to mow it, that's fine, you know. So that's kind of my stockpile, my backup stockpile. As I said, my backup, right? I wasn't planning on using it. I did use it just because I didn't want it to go to waste. So anyway, now I'm grazing in the southern half of my pasture. And for the fall season, which is rapidly coming, I'm going to just graze everything, okay? I'm going to go for as long as I can, get every piece of grass I can out of the ground. I'm not going to set aside anything for winter. There's really no point to that. Because the grasses that grow, that stay behind for the winter, that turn brown in the winter, there's nothing in there. It's just roughage. Okay, so what I'm going to do is graze everything in the fall, maybe 1 or 2 passes. I might go quicker for the second pass. And then I'm just going to basically set aside for the winter period, maybe half of my pasture that I'm not going to touch, and just keep grazing and rotating on the other half, and rolling out hay as much as I can. And then come springtime, which the grass will start to grow in March, but I'm going to wait until mid-April. About mid-April, when the calves start to drop, assuming that they're bred, which they should be. So when the calves start to drop in mid-April, that's when I'm going to turn them on to fresh, green, tall spring grasses. And we're going to try to cover the entire pasture as quickly as we can, right? We're going to try to just touch everything. There's going to be way too much grass, not enough time to graze it all. So right now the strategy is just to graze everything. Just take the last harvest of summer crop before summer stops, you know. So by the time we get here, it's going to be 12 weeks from now, 3 months. So we'll be here in November. And so by the time we get back here, hopefully, well, not hopefully, but if I plan my calendar right and my seasons right, then by the time I reach back to this point, then the pasture will be pretty much dead, right? It won't be growing anywhere. Everything will be brown. There won't be any green in sight, and the cows will be, you know, eating roughage and hay, and I'll be supplementing protein. Okay, so that's the plan, right? So maybe 1 or 2 more rotations, probably 1 more. Yeah, I think I'm going slow enough. I can probably have more animals on this land. Anyway, guys, that's kind of my insights. Number 1 is don't go back. Don't graze something you don't have. Don't graze something that's not ready to be grazed, right? You got to let it rest. And number 2 is set aside some of your pasture as what Greg Judy calls stockpile. And Jim Aliazar, I don't know his name, I'm sorry. I think he recommends, and I'm taking this secondhand from Ben at 365, you know, setting aside some of the pasture for a whole year that you just don't touch. You just let it stay fallow for a year. So, and I'm doing both experiments. I'm seeing what happens. So guys, have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.